Well, I don't understand how South Carolina's defense wasn't even better with all of this NFL draft talent. And we've said nice things about South Carolina, about South Carolina's defense, which, by the way, was excellent. Okay. It was awesome. Top 15 in scoring in both scoring defense and yards per play allowed. Clayton White deserves credit. Really improved unit. Okay. The development was on full display in Indy if you were watching some of these guys. But that group allowed at least 27 points in half of its SEC games. And 3 of those games were in the front half of the season. Turnovers were an issue. But LSU, if you go back and think about this too, because LSU only had 3 points off turnovers, 7 for Ole Miss and 7 for Bama. It wasn't like they were getting gashed necessarily in those spots where all of a sudden it's like leading to these 20-yard drives or something like that. But look, that group allowed 30 to Mizzou in a situation where they had everything rolling for them, and they couldn't get that stop when Luther Burden makes that unbelievable play on 4th down to be able to take the lead. And you know what happens the drive after that. It's Lenore Sellers. It's Rocket Sanders doing his Billingsley imitation. But that was an 18-point fourth quarter that South Carolina allowed that day with so much on the line. At least they hoped so much would be on the line. This was a year in which SEC offenses were historically down. Like they did not have these prolific in-conference play units that dominated and were averaging 37, 38 points per game. I did a deep dive on this on SDS about a week or 2 ago, and it was related to the fact that A&M statistically led the SEC in scoring points per game in conference play. And then if you kind of take away the defensive scores, it actually gets a little bit murky. And it just historically, it showed 2024 was a down year for SEC offenses. And I think South Carolina's defense had, early 2010s defensive talent on that side of the ball, maybe even more. And this is going to show you whether or not there was more, because the most defensive players that South Carolina has had selected in a draft during the Spurrier era was the 2012 draft class. It had 4 defensive players come off the board, 2 first-rounders, 2 seventh-rounders. This current class might not have a Stephon Gilmore, Melvin Ingram, guys like that who are early to mid round 1 prospects, but they had 8 defensive players at the combine this year, Will. South Carolina had 8 defensive players at the combine. That was as many as Ohio State. It was 2 more than Georgia. Georgia had 6. Texas had 5. I mean, in Texas, I realize they have some studs coming back, and that made a difference in that number. They had 8 defensive players at the combine. That's not even including Dylan Stewart. And look, Dylan Stewart might have the highest ceiling of all of those guys. It was just fascinating to watch guys like Nicky Manwari, Demetrius Knight. Those guys dominated the combine. TJ Sanders was unbelievable at the Senior Bowl. And we're not even talking yet about Kyle Kennard, the guy who won the Nagurski Awards, the best defensive player in college football. That is going to be a frustrating thing to look back on for South Carolina fans, especially if 2025 doesn't turn into a playoff year. And based on the 5.5 wins, is that over under? Let's just say those expectations might not be there for everyone. But as great as this year was, super rare collection of talent. You had Lenore Sellers balling out before defenses really knew how good he was, and you were still just short. And that, I think, is going to be a tough thing to look back on and not easy to replace.
Basically, if you look at the games that they lost, right, where did they struggle on defense? Okay, so number one, like the LSU game, they didn't struggle on defense that game.
Yes, they did.
LSU felt like they couldn't buy a yard for the first half in that game.
And then what did they do in the second half?
And then their quarterback got hurt. Then South Carolina's quarterback got hurt and they couldn't move the ball. And then a certain interception was taken off the board, right? So, like, at the end of the day, when the defense needed to make plays, they did. So, like, the interception stayed. I understand the return got taken off the board. But all I'm saying, Robbie Ashford's the reason why South Carolina lost to LSU and the call at the end, okay?
They had defensive moments in that game that they definitely wanted back. That it was just
I thought LSU was going to lose that game by 30 points, the way that their defense had them clamped for the first half of that game. They looked, and then again, quarterback gets hurt, and suddenly you got a backup quarterback in. Now things are different. Now Nussmeier finally gets going. But again, the biggest moment for Nussmeier was throwing a pick in that game. So, okay, boom. Now we're looking at Ole Miss. They scored 3 points. That was the offense's fault. I think if you give Jackson Dart and Lane Kiffin that much time, 27 is fine.
They came out of the gates looking pretty comfortable. Ole Miss did. in that game.
They have an awesome offense. They have probably a top 5 offensive mind in the sport, probably top 5, you know what I'm saying? Probably top 5 coach in the sport for offense. I don't think at 27 points is an embarrassing performance. And I mean, watching the flow of that game, it didn't feel like they really had a shot, but it was because of their offense, in my opinion, right? And then, okay, Alabama. Again, they have a shot at the end zone there for the 2-point conversion to tie that game. And the defense was turning Alabama over left and right at the end of the game. They were getting the ball back. It felt like Alabama looked uncomfortable at the key points of that game. They just kept giving them chances. And how did that game end? Interception for South Carolina. And so point being, like as far as the Damani Jackson one, right? Because they had a chance to tie it and then they get the ball back, boom, they throw a pick at the end. So point being, I don't think that any of that's the defense. I think that the offense struggled. I think the offense got a lot better starting with the Texas A&M game, and then boom. I think the offense hit their stride. I don't think the defense really got any better or worse.
My only counterpoint to that: we judge teams at that level when you've got 8 players in the NFL Combine, and you're going to see all these guys come off the board. We hold you to a much higher standard. We just do.
Mm-hmm.
If we're talking about a group that was allowing 14 points a game and getting to 21 felt like a monumental feat.
That didn't exist anymore, though. That's what I'm saying. 27 against Ole Miss is just fine. Like LSU let up more than that, and they beat Ole Miss.
Yeah. I just think that it'll be very easy to look back on that group and go, could they have been better? And that's a testament to your development. That's a testament to the type of year that you had, is that you had all these things working in your favor, but just to have, and it's at every level too. I mean, that's the incredible thing. I mean, I don't know if you can count Nicky Manwari as a safety, as a true safety with what he's doing at 6'3", 228, whatever he is.
Yeah.
Running and jumping. Like I look back on this group and I'll go, man, it is such a game of inches, and we're going to get to why that's significant with another guy here in a bit. But I think that group could have been even better, and that's a wild thing to say that I would not have. If you had told me at this time last year, Connor, South Carolina's going to have 8 guys on the defensive side of the ball in the NFL Combine, and you're going to be raving about this guy, that guy, and oh my gosh, look who did this week. I would have said, yeah, you take that all day, every day. And then you realize just how good the collection is. And you think to yourself, man, that could have been historically great, instead of just remembered as what's going to be the number 5 scoring defense in the SEC. I'm just saying, room for improvement with a really great group. And that's not the worst place to be as a program.
How about this? I'm much more worried about Mike Shula than Clayton White going forward.
I would agree with that.
How about that? How about that?
Yeah. We'll ask some questions about that.